Hello and welcome back to Codeblaze. So it's been a month again. I am very sorry for the delay. I've got no good excuses, but just have a lot of stuff piled on. Anyway, I want to finish this series as this will be some basic content that my channel is lacking. I don't have any basic level content, anything beginner friendly. So let's continue on. In the last episode, we set up the player scene and we could change the color in the editor also and actually define the colors so that we can reuse our color nodes in various places, basically wherever we want. So today we'll be looking into the player movement so that we will introduce the effect of gravity and on press of spacebar or touchscreen tap, the player will move up. And we'll also do some little bit of tweaking here and there, putting in some missing functionalities like randomizing the player color on start. So without further ado, let's get started. So we'll start by creating a script on the player node. I have the player scene open here. And if I select the root kinematic body 2D, I can just press this attach item and make sure it inherits from the kinematic body 2D. And I'll just place it in the source folder. Okay. And we'll call it player GD. Yeah, template can be empty. We don't need anything here. So let's create this. Okay, and I have this open here. So first we'll export some variables that will help us control the movement for the player. So that would be the jump speed and the gravity. We'll just say export var jump speed. By default, I'll set it to 1250, and these values are just what I found to be ideal for my case. You can definitely play around with them to achieve some different feel for your movement. So again, gravity will be equal to 2500. Okay. And all we need to do is now make sure the player falls. So what we'll do is we'll create the physics process, func and physics process. Okay. So in this, let's store our velocity also as a member variable. It will be a just private variable var velocity, and it will be a vector 2. Vector 2. Okay. So in a physics process, we'll basically increment the y value in the down direction every frame. So we'll say velocity dot y plus equal to vector 2 dot down dot y. So this way we can specify the direction into the gravity into the delta. Okay. So if you consider velocity, it's basically direction and speed, right? So gravity is our acceleration times when we multiply it by time, we get our speed and then we give it a direction. So hence it's velocity. Okay. That's if you see it from a physics point of view. Next, we'll make sure our velocity dot x is always 0. So each frame, even though it's not going to change, we'll be setting it to 0 just to make sure that we don't have any lateral movements. And once this is done, we need to do our input checking and our input stuff. So I'll basically define a method to do the input. So we'll have a get input method here. The comments with the hashtag. So we'll need to call get input here. Okay, so we'll define a get input later on. In this get input, we'll basically be checking for if the player has touched the screen or the space bar is pressed, and we'll be modifying the velocity accordingly. And finally, we'll need to apply this velocity to the kinematic body. And since we're extending from kinematic body, we have move and slide method available. And in our case, since there are not going to be any collisions, move and slide and the other move method, both are going to give the same result. So we'll use move and slide only. So we'll say velocity equal to move and slide, and we'll pass in the velocity. So ideally, like in our case, there is not going to be any update that move and slide will do because there will be no cases for slide happening. So with this saved, let's go back to our editor. Just ignore these errors. These are because I have a different VS Code project open, but not the editor. That's why it will complain about those stuff. Back to the player, we can see our gravity and jump speed is defined here. So if we play, you can see our player starts falling down, and our camera will start tracking it after it leaves that zone that we had defined in the first video. And we can see our infinite parallax also. Okay. So ideally, we won't fall this far down, right? As soon as player exits the screen, we will signal game over. So we won't see all this basically infinitely falling thing. Let's quit here. Okay, now we just need to define or basically implement the get input method. So to get our jumping working, we'll basically be applying an impulse to our body. And so whenever the space bar is pressed or I tap the screen on my mobile device, we'll be applying an impulse force in the y direction. So what this will look like is, let's define the get input method now. Func get input. So if we get input dot is action pressed, we'll say UI select UI select. Yeah. So there are some actions that are predefined in every Godot project. UI select is one of them. And this action will be triggered anytime you press space or tap on your mobile device. So you can change these actions and their key bindings in the project settings. So now anytime this action is pressed, we'll set the velocity dot y equal to vector 2 dot up dot y into jump speed. So you see I'm directly setting the velocity value rather than incrementing it or decrementing it. So what will happen here is anytime I touch the screen, velocity y would be set to 1250, and from the next frame it will again start on decreasing. And since this is an impulse force, I think this variable should be named jump force instead of jump speed. So we'll just rename this and make sure we call this method before our move and slide takes place. Okay. So we apply the gravity effect, then we look for our input and update the velocity if there is any change, and then finally we move. So let's save this and see it in action. I'll play. You see, as I'm pressing my space bar, I'm starting to go up. And the way we had defined our camera constraints, right? The camera is moving only in upward direction and not going below. So you can again play with this jump force and the gravity to get whatever value you want. But I think 1250 and 2500 is a pretty good starting point. So that's the values I'll be using. Okay, to get our input action working for touchscreen devices, we do need to make a small change in our project settings. I don't know if this changed with the latest versions of Godot or if I'm just missing something. So go to your UI select action in the input map for your project settings. Press the plus button. We'll choose the mouse button. Make sure it's all devices and set it to the left button. So this will capture the first touch input for your mobile devices and your left mouse button on your PC basically. So with this setup, the touch input should work. So if you open our game and I can see like if I left click, I'm able to jump, and this will work on your mobile devices also. So during the end of the series, I'll show you how you can export this game out as an APK, and we'll try to run it in a virtual device on my laptop. So we'll basically be handling the Android part of things also. Okay, so let's start with some cleanup now. So there's a few things that we want to do now. First, we would like that every time the game starts, the player has some random color out of the 4 values. And we should also link the game over condition. So we already have this visibility notifier. All we need to do is link to its signal so that instead of infinitely falling, we can do a game over. Okay. So let's go to our player GD and I'll open my reference also. Right. So first we'll get a reference to our color node so that we can randomly set the color value on each start. So to do that, we'll create on ready var. This will be our color node, and this will be equal to the color node. Okay, and it's not taking the type, so we'll manually define the type color node. Right. So to randomize this, we'll just create set the color in the ready function. So ready, and first we'll need to call randomize. So what this does is it randomizes the seed or the internal state of the random number generator so that on every run you get different values. If you don't call this randomize, you'll get the same random values on every run. And this is something that needs to be called once in your whole application. So later on, we may move this to a main GD script, which will act as our entry point. Okay. But for now, make sure you call this to get random values, different random values. Okay. Next, we'll take our color node and set current color, right? We have this setter. And to this, we need to pass an index from 0 to whatever is the max length of our colors node. And we want this to be a random value. So what we'll do is call the rand I. This will give a random integer, right? And to get a value between a specific range, we just need to do the modulus operation. If you see the docs here, it mention it. By default, random integer will give a value between 0 and whatever is the max integer value. And to limit it to some range, we can just do a modulus operator here. Right. And the range itself is going to be the length of the colors array. So let's do the modulus operator. That will be color node dot colors dot size. Okay. So with this at start, a random color would be set for our players. Let's see that. Okay, it's blue now. Right now it's red, and it's going to be any random value. It could be blue again, but you can be sure it will go through all the 4 values. We got purple, only yellow is missing. But yeah, our now we have random value or basically random color set for our player start. Next, we'll connect our visibility notifier to signal game over scenario. So now we'll take our visibility notifier 2D and go to the node, and you'll see all the signals available here. And we'll be connecting the screen exited signal, right? So we'll call connect, and we'll take the player script only, and we can just say on screen exited, right? We'll take the player script and press the connect. You see, we get our function defined. And what we'll be doing here is again re-emitting this signal so that basically we'll be handling the game flow or game logic from a different script that will kind of be our game manager. But for now, we can just log here, right? Let's just log something like game over. Okay, am I using log wrong? You can check that. Print. Okay. So anytime we get the game over, we can just print it for now. Later on, we'll handle it. Think it was mixing tabs and spaces. That's why I'm getting this error. Anyway, let's clear our logs and play the game. You see, I get the game over signal triggered as soon as I leave the screen. I come back, I again get that triggered, right? So we just need to now signal the game over whenever this happens. So we have this logic in place. Later on, when we'll be configuring the game flow from the start menu till the end screen, that is where we'll be using this signal. So that's all for today's episode. Next up, we'll be starting traps. So basically, the circles that will infinitely spawn and pickups and all your points handling and everything. So the game will start come together from the next episode. So be tuned for that. I'll try to get it out as soon as possible. Uh, Again, you can bash me in the comments for the delays that are happening. I want to be dedicated to this channel. There's no doubts or questions about that. So please do leave a rating down below. Any suggestions you have, leave them down below in the comments and subscribe for the upcoming content. Thank you.